Story 1. Early childhood trauma is visible in teeth. Trauma, in this sense, is anything that causes a stress response in the body. Could be illness, parental separation, or abuse, among other factors. Teeth grow at a predictable rate, almost exactly like trees. If you bisected a tooth and examined it under a microscope, you would see rings of growth. Growth is disrupted in times of stress. The first stress ring we all had on our baby teeth is from birth. Other stressors can create other disrupted growth rings in baby teeth. And the same is true for adult teeth as they are still forming. My former professor was a pioneer in dental anthropology. For his work on these stress lines, he would ask his zoo colleagues to send him the teeth of deceased primates, or just teeth that had to be pulled. He would demand no other information be given at first. Then he and his graduate students would section the teeth, put them under a microscope, and print out the pictures. They would mark visible signs of disrupted growth. And with knowing that birth is the first disruption and the rate at which teeth grow, they could then give day counts for every growth disruption after birth. Once they collected their data, my professor would then ask their zoo colleagues for the daily health logs for the primate. And what they found is that each growth disruption exactly corresponded to stress events in the primate's life. Some instances were from illness or the like. But to me, the most interesting event he told us about was seeing a stress line on the tooth that exactly corresponded with the primate, as a baby being removed from their mother for a period of time to do necessary health checks at the zoo. This caused such a stress response in the baby that it was visible in the tooth growth. Story 2. About 20 years ago, I worked for a printing company with a contract with a funeral home federation. We printed everything for them, including a sheet that was sent out to funeral homes, showcasing wholesale casket pricing and the amount of profit to be made from the sale of each. Back then, a casket's wholesale cost was 10% of what they were charging consumers. So, that $5,000 casket only cost them $500. I can only imagine the upcharge now. Story 3. When you go to Vegas and a casino advertises 99.9% payouts, legally, that means that at least one machine on the casino floor has that payout among the other hundreds of machines in the casino, and probably only one. Story 4. There is a whole wealth of historical information and information generally that is not available online at all. Digitizing things takes a lot of people power that many libraries and archives simply don't have. Story 5. A shockingly low number of kids are actually on grade level and they just get passed on, whether or not they are literate. When I taught English at a Title I school, I had around 38% pass, and that was considered good. When state tests were canceled in 2020, everyone on my Facebook was exclaiming, "They are just going to pass everybody to the next grade." But what if someone would have failed the test, but now they get to go to the next grade anyway? That is already over 60% of kids. The general public thinks that if they fail all their classes and the state tests, they have to stay behind because they are not proficient. Sadly, no. Story 6. If someone has diarrhea or vomits in a pool, it doesn't need to be drained. In fact, draining the pool might even be less effective if proper disinfection procedures aren't followed after draining the pool. Instead, the chlorine level needs to be raised to at least 20 parts per million ppm for at least 13 hours after all physical pieces of vomit or feces have been removed. Doing this will kill any possible Cryptosporidium bacteria in the pool. What does 20 ppm chlorine feel like? Simply by putting your hand in the water to get a sample will cause your skin to dry up. Edit. Pool needs to be closed for 13 hours, not 23. Story 7. I am a writer for corporate websites. We purposely write at a 5th grade reading level so that individuals who are not educated can read the site, and so it is easier for visually impaired people to use their screen readers. Story 8. We really do try to design construction zones to guide you through as easily as possible. A lot of thought and hard work go into designing those traffic restrictions. Sometimes there just aren't any good solutions. We can't fix it if you're driving on it. And yes, sometimes we do tear up a perfectly good road. What you don't know is that the fixing we did 3 years ago was just a temporary measure to keep the road drivable for 5 years until we can complete the design to repair what's really wrong. That 1.5 inches of milling and resurfacing is holding the crumbling base together long enough to secure the funding to do the real construction. Story 9. Expensive cars remain expensive. The tires are expensive, the parts are expensive, and the people who work on them are expensive. Buying a Porsche or a BMW isn't a one-time splurge. This might seem obvious, but I worked in a garage, and I promise I saw someone having that unpleasant realization every day. Story 10. When you call a company and speak to someone in their call center, odds are that no matter how much you dislike that company, the person you are talking to dislikes it far more. If you're not rude to them, they will likely look for any loophole or break they can give you. Story 11. How rotten a lot of bridges are. I work in highway maintenance, and quite a few of them are in hideous condition and overdue for replacement. I can think of one where the deck is more or less held in place by gravity and moves up and down independently of the structure beneath. This happens because it is becoming misaligned due to a lateral force exerted on it by eroding riverbanks. Fortunately, that one is finally under contract to be replaced this year. Story 12. I work in medical billing and coding in the United States. 9 times out of 10, when your insurance denies coverage for a procedure or service, it's an error on how it was billed or coded by the provider's office, and you should research it with the billers and your insurance before you pay. Story 13. I work at the corporate level. True executive compensation is mind-blowing. I am not talking about base salary, bonuses, and stocks. Those are public knowledge and we hear about them every day. I am talking about the extra perks no one talks about. Things like mortgages subsidized by the organization, company cars that are 6-figure luxury vehicles, car and home insurance on the company account, company-paid private schools and tutors for children, wardrobe, beauty, and fitness stipends, club memberships, access to the corporate jet for personal travel. I could go on and on. Imagine what simply not having to pay your full mortgage or car loan would do for you financially, much less all of the rest. Story 14. People in retirement homes have a lot of sexual activity, including both couples and widows. There is also a significantly high rate of sexually transmitted diseases among retirement home residents. Retirement homes have one of the highest infection rates for sexually transmitted diseases. This phenomenon can be attributed to the effectiveness of medications like Viagra and the abundance of free time among the elderly. Story 15. I work in upper management in a large company, and I am shocked at how often people think something is a calculated move with data that we analyze to come up with the conclusion that X is the most profitable way. Even if we have analysts with data, most big decisions are made by some executive suite person or in a meeting with nobody reading any data or maybe just a front page and then just saying, "Forget this, we will do it this way," even if it completely contradicts the data. It's just a bunch of random guys betting on their hunch, rarely asking for data on anything. Even if something is calculated, it most likely is because we have had a problem with it for X years, and someone says we will do it another way and the numbers turn out better, no longer a problem. There is not much logic running companies. Story 16. Those stupid little pillows on the bed in a hotel room take millions of dollars to design. I had a designer change their mind after we had already ordered and manufactured 300 rooms worth of stupid pillows, so we had to trash them all and begin again. Oh, and because the design is proprietary to the designer and the hotel chain, they can't be donated or sold. They just go straight to a landfill. Story 17. The number of women and men who have been horribly sexually and physically abused in childhood is absolutely astonishing and way more than most people can even fathom. I hate my job sometimes. Story 18. Forensic psychologist. There are so many horrendous crimes that happen that never reach the news or mainstream media. And there are trends in which crimes actually get reported. For example, domestic violence is very in right now and a hot topic, so you will see a lot of that in the news. It's not that it's actually happening more than usual. The reporting is just skewed by what stories will actually sell. Story 19. I'm a mascot performer. People constantly want to talk about how hot it must be inside the costumes. But the truth is I don't feel the heat. Don't get me wrong, I take steps to avoid overheating and dehydration. But once you've done this job long enough, the temperature inside the costume just feels like normal. Before this, I was a journalist. I could talk about the misconceptions there, but that would require an essay. Story 20. I work at a union, and I think the average person would be shocked by the amount of abuse that is happening in the job market. Bosses strategically bullying their employees, jumping through tons of legal hoops to fire employees in a way that leaves them with the least benefits. Companies going through $100,000 worth of lawyers to avoid paying wages amounting to like $15,000. Thousands of people every month, many of them not believing they would ever need a union, thinking their workplace would never do something to them. And that is here in Denmark with strong unions and solid workplace protections. I seriously dread how this would look in many other countries. I sort of knew it was bad before I started, but after roughly 10 years, I have sort of accepted that no one should ever really trust their company to not betray them over, sometimes for stupid, petty reasons. Story 21. Working in cybersecurity, hospitals are found to be the least secured of all the places I visited. This includes both physical and network security. We managed to gain access to the operation room through social engineering. People in hospitals are trained to help, which shapes their mindset. Regarding the network, it is overall very poorly secured. This, combined with machines that are essential for keeping people alive or play a significant role in a critical chain, raises concerns. I am surprised that we do not witness more adverse events happening in the world than we currently do. Story 22. You would not eat at half the restaurants you go to if you saw the kitchen. If you worked in the industry, that jumps to 75% because you recognize the flaws that someone who has not worked in the industry would miss or think are normal. The last 20 to 25% are barely above board. Story 23. Physician. There are too many to list. A few that come to mind. There is a large number of people living with a brain aneurysm or some other form of blood vessel anomaly in the brain, such as arteriovenous malformation, that is completely asymptomatic and will go unnoticed and may rupture one day with catastrophic consequences. Many hospitals have a mice infestation problem. A lot of doctors like to party and consume a significant amount of drugs, off-duty mostly. The overuse of antibiotics is likely to induce the emergence of superbacteria that will probably lead at some point to an epidemic that will make COVID-19 seem like a walk in the park. Story 24. I work in housing for Los Angeles. There are millions of dollars that get wasted every year because people don't know how to correctly fill out a housing application that could get them housed for free. Or they got high and forgot to submit it. People are so worried about the homeless crisis in major cities. But if people knew how much money we really have, mostly from taxes and private millionaire donors, you would be shocked. And the housing isn't just a bedroom in a halfway house. It's a genuine, nice one-bedroom apartment. Story 25. Information technology. The technician probably knows you are lying and will just play along. The average user has no idea that help desks are usually looking at logs and health data on your PC the moment you get on the phone with them. Story 26. Most suicides are not dramatic newsworthy events. I am not saying they are not meaningful, but they happen quietly. My husband committed suicide in our home. No news crew is going to cover that, nor did we want them to. Story 27. Because of ridiculously overt countermeasures by the government to minimize fraud and liability lawsuits, about 75% of what people in the social services field do is documentation. Workers could be spending more time in the field and are helping more people in need, but they are instead taking a constant slew of courses about sometimes completely unrelated subjects, filling out 10 documents to get one little thing done, and making revision after revision to ensure repayment by the source of funding. Story 28. Half of the world's population has a nutritional deficiency. 3 billion people can't afford a healthy diet. 735 million people go to bed hungry every day. Food and agriculture are responsible for a third of greenhouse gas emissions and the vast majority of deforestation, land use change, biodiversity loss, and freshwater withdrawal. Story 29. When you go to a restaurant and there are multiple empty tables and they tell you there's a wait, it's because the kitchen is backed up. Sure, everyone says, "Oh, I'll just wait at the table." Sorry, individuals before you who were given that opportunity and complained incessantly about how long they have been there is why no restaurant will ever seat you in this situation, no matter how nice or patient you claim to be. Story 30. You need long-term care insurance. When you are frail and dying, you need 24/7 care. You cannot just hire someone to come to help grandma get out of bed and back into bed. If you cannot afford someone to stay at home, if you cannot afford a nursing home, you will need to liquidate grandma's assets to pay for her care. You can't just let grandma stay at home by herself because you want her money when she dies.